Today on Youth Connect, we continue our discussion on marriage pressure and personal readiness, focusing on the male experience. In Nigeria, men are often expected to be financially stable before marriage, a demand made even harder by today's economic realities. These expectations shape how men view commitment, yet their struggles are rarely discussed. This conversation will explore how men navigate these pressures and define readiness in their own way. Welcome to Youth Connect, brought to you by Trust TV. I am Fatima Ahmed Musa. Now let's go on a quick break, and when we return, you get to meet my guest, and then we'll go into the discussion proper. Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. Now joining me in the studio is Muhammadu Liman. He's a writer. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again, Fatima. Great to be here.
Thank you. So we're discussing marriage pressure and personal readiness. We've had this conversation with a female last week, and a lot of comments said we didn't balance the conversation, and hence we have to do that. So can you tell us what marriage readiness means to you and the pressure that Nigerian youths tend to go through?
Well, before I even begin, I saw last week's episode, and I just want to commend your guest. I thought she made some excellent points, and I thought she presented the topic extremely well. Marriage readiness, to me, is a personal readiness. Of course, our society will always give you a checklist of you need to have this, you need to have this, you need to have this. But I think at the end of the day, it depends on you as a person and whether you feel like you are ready. Sometimes it's based on money, sometimes it's based on having this or having that. But if you feel like you with your 5 naira, you're ready to be married and you can handle everything that comes with marriage, and I think that's still the best time to get married.
But as a man in Nigeria, what does society expect from you, before you can consider marriage?
I think that's a great question. And before I even get into that, I want to speak about how you look as a married man. I think that will help us understand the point I want to make. When you're a married man, the first time you walk into a room, people see you as someone who can, one, take care of themselves, someone who can take care of others, somebody who is a leader because you have a home of people who are taking instructions from you or taking direction from you. They see you as somebody whose character and sense of responsibility is so great that people entrust you with what is theirs. For example, a father will give you his daughter. That's what being married says about you. So if that's what being married says about you, what does being single then say about you? And that's where you get to understand the pressure that men go through as, being single or being unmarried. Mm-hmm.
So how about being single? Now you just gave us the how married men are viewed. Yeah. So single men are not serious? Is that what it means?
That's, nobody will come out to tell you that as a single man you aren't serious. But you will see it a lot in, the male social structure, that as an unmarried man, there's a certain amount of respect you don't have. Maybe you walk in the room and people don't take you as seriously. Maybe people don't value your time as much. They'll say, sorry to speak out, nobody's waiting for you at home. And there are even places you go to where if you're an unmarried man, they won't let you lead any prayers. So, these are the kind of things that we go through as unmarried men or as men who haven't.
Yeah. So how much does financial pressure influence, your decision now, let's say, to delay or pursue marriage?
I think finances are perhaps one of the biggest obstacles to getting married. We all know the economy we live in, the country we live in, and our culture and religion as well, that dictate that as a man it's your responsibility to bear the full financial burden. Mm-hmm. And we live in a country now where people are struggling to take care of themselves. So to have a culture that's constantly telling you in your face that first you will take care of yourself, then you will take care of someone else, and when you have kids, you take care of all of them too. You just wonder how am I meant to do this? Mm-hmm.
So does getting married has to do, aside from personal readiness, which you mentioned earlier, do you think money or emotional maturity or stability also plays a role?
I think yes, especially when you speak about emotional maturity. When we speak about finances, sometimes people think that you need to have so much to be married. But like I said earlier, it's not necessarily about how much you have, but how you're able to use what you have, or how you think about the situation you're in, and how you think you can build a life for yourself and somebody else. So I think, yes, that emotional maturity is part of it. Stability is definitely part of it, because if you're struggling, how will you build something that's stable?
So is the expectation to always be provider making some men afraid of getting married?
I think it makes a lot of men afraid of getting married, and not even just afraid of getting married, but afraid of facing society in general. Because it seems that as a man, and many men go through this, if you don't have that financial readiness, you are almost seen as not a whole man. You're just somebody there because maybe you can't contribute enough to your immediate environment. So I think it makes you, yes, one, scared to get married, but also scared to face society.
How about family and cultural expectations affecting men's confidence in taking steps into marriage?
Okay, so for me to explain this, I need to take us away a little bit to give some foundational knowledge. When you look at male relationships, or the male structure, it's largely built on, and Aristotle says this in a write-up called the Nemosian Ethics, I think that's what it's called. He says that male relationships are largely built on admiration and respect, as opposed to mutual affection. And if you want to even get more modern, Jordan Peterson as well says that male relationships are built on a hierarchy of competence. And what am I trying to say? In the male-dominated space, we may not necessarily all like each other, but the reason we can coexist and cohabitate is because there's a mutual sense of respect. And how do you gain that respect? Well, one of those ways is being married, especially the older you get and the further you go. So the pressure that men face, and the reason why it seems like men aren't really under pressure from society, is because the consequence of that pressure for men isn't humiliation, which is something women go through, and nobody will deny that. It's more of ostracization. You might walk into a room and feel like, oh, they've excluded you. When you talk, it's not held in high regard. People don't count you when they're speaking of, oh, this guy and this guy who can be responsible for this. Why? Because you aren't married. They may not necessarily embarrass you, but you'll just find that things are difficult for you to do. It's difficult for you to gain access to things, to people, to places. Why? Because you are seen as an unmarried man. You are not yet a responsible man.
All right. So how about men, also feeling pressure to hide their fear and struggle when it comes to marriage?
Yes, I think that's a big thing. And some people will argue that times have changed, and as a man you should be able to share your feelings or share the way you feel. But I think any man will tell you truthfully that society doesn't pity men at all. It's more of figure it out, and for better or for worse, that's the reality we face. So I understand why a lot of men will feel like they should hide their situation and just do their best, because maybe that energy will be better put through getting through the situation, as opposed to sitting down and maybe wallowing in your sentiments. So
are you saying that men should hide the pressure they go through, especially when it comes to marriage, or are you saying that it's better they express themselves? So which are you going for? Are you for or against them expressing?
Well, I think it depends on you as a man, where you find yourself, because in my opinion, and a lot of women may not like this, but I feel like there's an almost complete lack of empathy from women in the society. For example, now, you trying to get married, lots of women will say, yeah, the economy is bad and things are hard, but yeah, you should figure it out, then get married. Or some women feel as though they're doing you a favor by saying, you don't have much, but we can manage the small you have. And what do you mean by we can manage the small I have? Like, why don't I bring mine, you bring yours, and then we build a life together? So you see already that the place that we are as a people doesn't allow you as a man to express the fears you have, because nobody is even thinking of that. Figure it out, and then when you figure it out, you can continue.
So are you saying that there are women that cannot do 50-50, like you said, bring yours, let them bring theirs, to, have a family together? They want the man to always do everything? Is that what you're saying?
I think it would be unfair to say that there aren't women who can do 50-50. There will always be exceptions, but the majority of the time, even if you meet women who are willing to do 50-50, they usually would rather not. And I think that's the reality of the situation.
All right, so let's take a look at the video of, a part of the conversation that trended last week, where I asked my guest about women in their 30s, how they're being treated. Let's take a look and hear what she said. How are single youths, especially, women in their 30s, being treated?
They are not being treated nicely, to be honest. Women in their 30s are seen as a failure. I mean, I was going through a tweet, and I saw this tweet one time that says, if she's 30 and she's unmarried, she's not a good person, because if she was a good person, somebody must have wiped her in her 20s. So imagine somebody reading that and having that notion that every woman that is unmarried in her 30s are bad, or they are not wife material. But forgetting that
it could be personal.
Yeah, things do happen. Heartbreaks, not finding somebody suitable. Some people are going through trauma. Childhood traumas are there. Some people are scared of getting married because of the whole situations that we see today, the domestic violence, the
constant abuse and
all that. So women in their 30s are not being treated right, and they tend to age shame them. You're old. But a man in his 30 is a young man, but a woman in her 30, she's old. Did you see the double standard? So it's very appalling. They're not being treated nicely at all. I feel like the society should do better in trying to treat these women nicely.
I mean, the pressure that we get to go through from even parents saying, you're getting to 35, 40, you need to get married. You need time.
Yes.
I mean, who determines when it's time and when it's not time?
I don't know. They just make it seem as if it's your fault that you're unmarried at that age. Sometimes they'll come and tell you, they will even preach to you to lower your standard. They'll tell you, no, it's because you're being selective. Lower your standard. You will see, men are not scarce. If this one comes, just marry him. Just get married. But I'll say, God forbid I marry for marry's sake. If he's not worth it, then don't go for it. I mean, there are women that got married in their 40s. Look at Rita Dominic. She got married in her 40s.
And she's happy.
She's happy there. Yes. Even look at Leila.
Yeah. A lot of them. So whenever I see these women getting married and they are happy, I am genuinely happy for them, because it shows that there is light at the end of the tunnel for women that sees themselves as, I can't get married again. It kind of brings this hope that I can still find a man that would love me regardless. Love me crazy, regardless of my age, regardless of what people say, I am too old, or you need to find a younger girl. And most of the time when they preach a younger girl, it's because they want to control them, because it's very hard for you to control women in their 30s and in their 40s, because now there's nothing you can do to brainwash them. They've gone through life. They are exposed. They've seen things. So you cannot brainwash a 30 plus woman the way you can brainwash a 20. Well, Muhammad, that's what Firdausi said. What do you have to say about that? Because, I asked her how women, especially single women in their 30s, are being treated in our society today, and you heard what she responded. What will you say about this particular conversation?
Well, like I said, I have to commend her again. She spoke very well and made a lot of real points. But what I'll say is, going back to what I said initially, is whenever you have these kind of conversations, what I see is an overwhelming lack of empathy from women. And I think that's why these conversations don't really move forward, because on one hand, you find that women don't have the willingness to understand the male perspective And on the other hand, even where they do understand the male perspective, there isn't a lot of empathy shown. It's just, okay, I understand, but figure it out. You know, so when she said that there are double standards between men and women, it just shows me that same lack of understanding again. Because as I said before, what men go through as a consequence of the pressure for marriage isn't humiliation. You know, you rarely find men, especially the higher you climb up the ladder, trying to embarrass each other. But what you see is a very real consequence of the life you're living. Like I said, ostracization. Maybe they don't look at you to lead prayers. Maybe nobody thinks you're responsible. And if you come from a home where your younger brother marries before you, you know, anything he says now has more weight than anything you say. Why? Because he's now a married man. Forget him being your younger brother, and no matter how many years he's younger than you, you know. And so that's one of the areas where I feel like there should be more of an open discussion or more understanding so that we can move forward. Yeah, and then one of the other things she said was
they cannot brainwash women in their 30s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She said they can't brainwash women in their 30s. And my reaction to that is this. I have a philosophy that in life or in love and in marriage, you can ask for anything you want, because this is the rest of your life. You're the one that will be with the person. So if you feel like what you want is a billionaire, if you feel like what you want is a soldier, what you want is a pilot, what you want is a businesswoman, what you want is a chef, you're very allowed to ask for what you want. And I find that when people are getting married, there's usually, you can narrow the things they want down to a few things. Let me give you some examples rather. Some people want a leader in marriage. They want somebody to give them direction. And not just women. You hear of a lot of powerful men, and people will say that, yeah, but it's his wife that's making the decisions, it's his wife that's actually giving him all the knowledge he's using. And some men like that. Some men want direction.
So it's a woman that controls the home.
woman that controls the home. And some men are okay with that. That's what some people want. Some people want a partner. Somebody that will bring their 50, you bring your 50, and they work together. And some people want a sidekick. Somebody who, okay, I've built this here. Just come and add what you can add to it. I'll take care of you. Not necessarily just men. Some women want that too. Some career women. And why I say this is to say that the idea that you instantly jump to, oh, men want to control younger women, I think that's a little bit unfair. I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for somebody who will do 50-50 with you, then yeah, you will go and find a career woman who has already her money, her house, her car, her this and that. She will bring her 50, you will bring your 50. But the majority of men aren't looking for that, and I think that's fair. You know, you can ask for whatever you want. So if the majority of men are looking for somebody who will, I don't want to use the word sidekick because it doesn't sound nice, but if you're looking for somebody who will join what you're already building, then a lot of times you will go for somebody that's still in the early stages of their life and their career.
All right, so let's go on a quick break. I want to return. We'll continue this discussion. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. If you're just joining, this is Youth Connect coming to you from the studios of Trust TV here in the nation's capital. Well, before we went on break, we were talking about, the age, preference. Like Fidelsi mentioned, men marry 20 or 30 because they want to control, which you've already cleared that. But at what point does waiting for readiness now becomes a form of avoidance when we're talking about marriage? Because some people tend to stay longer. Maybe they have their reasons why they're not getting married. So at what point does it become or seem like an avoidance?
I think at the point where you begin to try to meet unrealistic standards, I think that's where it begins to become avoidance. Because, okay, society will say you need to have this, this, and this in different proportions. But once you start telling yourself, no, I need the most of this, or I need the highest of this before I can even think of getting married, then at that point there's something deeper there. You know, that's where to me it starts to become avoidance. You see the idea of duty, for example. A lot of people view marriage as duty because of the way society has painted marriage, and people who see marriage as a duty rather than something they want to do willingly are the people who tend to fall into the avoidance trap. Because you think, okay, it's my duty, and in order to fulfill my duty, I have to have these prerequisites. And sometimes the prerequisites are subconsciously placed high because you know you won't really meet them, or it will be hard for you to meet them. So yes, at that point I feel like you've gone into avoidance.
How is the current economic realities that we are facing in Nigeria changing the way men view commitment in today's society?
Yeah, that's, I think, a very good question. And when you think of commitment, I know we're speaking about marriage, but I think where it has actually had the greatest effect is the premarital stage. So the courtship stage, perhaps dating. What you see now is a lot of reluctance from men to date or to meet women. Why? Because the economy is hard. I don't have money for us to go on 20 dates before we decide to settle down, or I don't have money for us to go on 10 dates and then you decide you don't like me. I can't take all those kind of financial risks. And for lots of women as well, because in truth there are patient women. There are women who don't need you to have the highest level of financial stability before they can marry you, and for them as well it's a risk, because now you're saying, okay, you need to be stable, but you aren't stable and you want me to consider you. If I consider you now and then down the line you let me down, that's a risk for her as well. So I think the financial realities of the country affect both men and women.
How about if you think men delay marriage because they fear failure more than loneliness?
I do think,
is that possible?
The possibility that men fear failure more than loneliness, I think that's a very real reality, because as I was saying earlier, male relationships are largely built on respect, and you often hear it said in popular culture that these men aren't trying to impress women, they're trying to impress other men. And I think that's very true. The idea that you don't live up to the standards of your male peers, I think that fear of failure is what actually drives people to marriage, not necessarily the feeling of loneliness.
Are you also the kind of person that takes on matchmaking? Do you think it works?
I think it works, and in fact I think it works more than the fairy tale idea of love that people have. In my opinion, I think a lot of ideas that have an impact in society come from mainstream media, and one of them is the idea of love. I think you can build marriage on mutual affection, of course, but you can also build marriage on shared values. If you know that, okay, I want a wife who's honest, who is kind, who is loving, and I want a husband who is strong, who's reliable, who can take care of us. If you find that person, if they find that person for you, the marriage can still work because you have shared values.
So coming back to the question I asked Firdausi last week, are men in their 30s being treated the same way women in their 30s being treated?
Not the same way, but I think equally as bad. When you're in your 30s, like I was saying to you earlier, what you get is you see that there's almost a lack of approval in a male-dominated space, but a lack of approval that's not voiced out. You just suddenly see that your rights are being limited, because normally as you grow as a man, you grow stronger, you grow wiser, and you feel that, okay, more of the world should be accessible to you. But then you hit a certain age where you see that, okay, I'm growing wiser, I'm more intelligent, but, certain access is being lost. Why? Because people don't see me as a responsible man. They don't see me as a leader. I don't have marriage to tell people that, yes, I can give direction, I can be trusted, my character is good. And so what you find is you begin to be ostracized very quietly, like I was saying earlier. Maybe you don't lead prayers, maybe, your words don't hold the same weight, maybe your opinions aren't regarded as highly, maybe you aren't as trusted as other men who are seen as married and responsible.
Well, in 30 seconds, doesn't the society give men the freedom to, become more mature before they go into marriage? The expectations, of course.
I think yes. I think society gives men a lot more time than it gives women. That I will honestly admit. But at the same time, I think the expectations or the prerequisites on men are significantly higher than women. For example, as a woman, you can sit in your dad's house until you're ready to get married, and then you find someone, you get married. But as a man, you have to find a way to, especially in the context of this economy, have your own house, have your own stability, have your savings, have your investments, have your plan for the future before you can marry. And anyone will admit that that takes a lot more time. So I think, yes, men are given more time, but fairly so.
All right. Thank you so much, Muhammadu Liman, for being part of this program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we conclude today's discussion, it's clear that marriage pressure affects men too, even if it's often silent. For healthy marriages, we need honesty, patience, and understanding. Marriage should be built on readiness, not pressure. Join us again next week for another insightful conversation. I am Fatima Ahmed Musa, and in case you missed any of our episodes, you can do well to catch us across all our social media platforms. Thank you for watching.